So, with the release of Phantom Liberty, Cyberpunk 2077 has a renewed interest that's been poured into the game from the community. Phantom Liberty, to me, has met my expectations and has breathed new life into the game for me personally. However, Phantom Liberty has brought about a bunch of new bugs and glitches into the game. It's nowhere near as bad as launch, but not being able to upgrade your weapons, skill shards not showing up, lack of legendary components, weird save problems, semi-frequent crashes, and menus and abilities no longer being accessible after cutscenes. Yeah, that stuff isn't fun to interact with either. Regardless, none of that is what I'm here to talk about today. Today we will be discussing the new ending added with Phantom Liberty, the Tower ending, and many in the community's less than positive reaction to it, with some people even calling it the worst ending in Cyberpunk 2077. So, is this ending the worst one? Is it the worst ending in Cyberpunk 2077? Personally, the Path of Least Resistance ending, where V decides to end it all, is not a great ending to me. Not only is it just the least satisfying, or nothing that you did mattered at all, it also is just really sad and depressing. And while I don't want every story to have a happy ending where everything is fine and dandy, there is, I think, a difference between a sad ending that still has some hope for a better future, or a tragedy even with a happy silver lining, than the absolute utter misery that is the Path of Least Resistance. Path of Least Resistance, I think, is the worst ending, no question. There just is no redeeming qualities to talk about at all. It's just miserable. But let's be honest with ourselves here. Does anyone actually consider that a real ending? Because I don't personally. I view it more like that secret Far Cry endings that you have, where you can just wait like 10 minutes and then end the game. It's not supposed to be legitimate, in my opinion. It's one of those things where it's nice to have the option, but I don't think anyone outside of like 5 people think that's the way the game's supposed to end. And because of that, while that is an ending, and it is the worst one, I don't think it's really fair to compare it to the other ones, because it's just not how the game was supposed to end. It's not how you're supposed to end the game. It's just not satisfying at all. And I don't think it was supposed to be anything more than a nice addition for the select few people who like that sort of stuff or just wanted to have the option. So because of that, I think it's much more fair to compare the new ending with the 4 other OG endings. Whoa. Hold on just a minute. Comparing? We're not comparing shit in this video. Sorry, previous me, but as it turns out, comparing stuff is hard. But no, seriously, I think it's a bit unhelpful in this video to just compare endings to one another, because it's just not fair. The previous endings that have existed in this game have, well, been around since the beginning, but more than that, this DLC ending is trying to do something different than all these other endings are, which I will elaborate on a little bit later. But more than that, it's just reductive, I think, to do one-on-one comparisons between endings, because you just can't do one-on-one comparisons with something as vague and as subjective as something like this, I think. It's not like we're comparing sports players. I can put the stats on a page and be like, this is what player A did and player B did. The endings are left vague in a lot of places. They're left to interpretation. They're left for your imagination to run wild in a lot of places, and the reactions that companions and people have to you can be entirely different ending to ending, and because of that, it's not exactly cohesive in a weird enough way. So all this just means is that while originally I was just going to compare the endings on one-on-one basis, not only does that take forever, it's just also not helpful, because it is very easy, I think, for personal beliefs and feelings about these characters to shroud not only what is actually happening, but to make up and fill in the blanks, so to speak, of what hasn't happened, because the endings are again left sort of up to your interpretation about what they could mean and what's going to happen. So because of that, I think it's a mistake if you compare these endings and be like, well, the star ending does this where the tower doesn't. It's just not helpful, and I don't think it's fair to compare endings that way. Anyway, back to the video. Sorry for my dumbass leaving that in the script. Anyway, so this brings us back to square one of our question. Is the tower ending the worst ending in Cyberpunk out of the original 4? Is the tower worse than the sun, the star, the devil, and temperance? Before we break this down, let's discuss the setup in-game for how this ending occurs, namely the lack of communication that is required to establish this ending. V doesn't tell anyone that this procedure is happening. You have the option to tell your romance and Victor, but if you're like me, you didn't romance anybody this time around, you just have the option to tell Victor, which is odd to say the least. Many people have a significant problem with this, because in their minds, V obviously would have told everybody that they were getting cured, and would have been loud and maybe open with that fact, but my only response to that is, would they? I mean, for one thing, whether your V is open about the relic at all, or is rather flippant with the facts, is completely up to you. Well, it would make sense that more chatty Vs would spill the beans. If you don't like any of the companions, or you didn't trust them, or you didn't even interact with them for whatever reason, then why would you tell them? More than that, V is, and I do mean this as endearing as possible, a massive dumbass, as evident by stuff like putting a bayonet on a pistol, and they are going on the belief that this will only take them out of commission for like 2 weeks max, not years. So they say they're having a minor medical procedure and then leave it at that. Even Victor assumes you're just chasing another lead rather than finding a substantial cure. Then V is gone for 2 years. It's not unreasonable to assume that V ghosted or that they are just straight up dead. It's not unreasonable for companions to be upset at V in either scenario, because in both of them, V betrayed their trust, either by leaving them behind or by not letting them help V, and V ending up dead because of that, at least in their minds. And continuing on with a lack of communication, people have discussed why Reed didn't update anyone on V, and I've seen a fair amount of people say that it doesn't make sense for Reed, or anyone else for that matter, to not tell V's friends they are in a coma. But I don't want to be mean when I say this. Did you play Phantom Liberty? Did you play Cyberpunk 2077? Because Reed, for one, didn't tell any of his actual friends that he was alive for 7 years. Forget the friends of someone who he's known for maybe a month. More than that, Reed and anyone around V are all NUSA/Militech agents. Why would they spill corporate secrets, which is V in this case, to a bunch of nobodies, especially since there's tensions brewing that could lead to a fifth corporate war, as we find out in this ending? Why would they risk their lives and their master's security to update like 6-ish people on the condition of one person who, to even get to this point in the ending, had to betray Militech and kill a bunch of their comrades? Also, this isn't the real world here. Reed unironically does you and your friends a favor by not letting anyone know about you. Because if this information were to leak, you wouldn't get sued or forced to sign an NDA. You will get killed, sold to Maelstrom or scavs, and your body torn apart for your organs and chrome. Or even better, a corporate death squad will be sent to kill you and your family and dump your bodies into the ocean or in a vat of acid. Hell, in this expansion, if you side with that reporter in this sort of mini side mission over the Militech agent, Netwatch sends agents to kill you and wrap up further loose ends. If you save Nelly, Biotechnica hires Afterlife mercs to kill you. The only thing that would have resulted for Reed or anyone else telling your friends about you would have been their deaths and your friend's death. Now, the reason I want to talk about this first is because this is probably the most misunderstood part of this whole ending, because I think people really misunderstand that this is not a Marvel thing, nor is it another game like Dragon Age Origins or something where every companion can have this fantastical fairy tale ending if you wanted to. It's Cyberpunk, and because CDPR tried to make this game not only realistic in a lot of ways, but as also as dystopian as possible, well, this is the result. People don't talk to each other, they don't communicate, there's secrets, and people get upset maybe at you for unreasonable things, for unreasonable reasons, and people don't act within strict caricatures or character types. V is a chatty Cathy to some people, sure, but they are at times also quiet and silent and don't have much to say. And that is realistic, because in the real world, when people stop being friends or enter something like witness protection, the reason for why that stuff happens is not always clear and can make it seem like in this scenario that V is just kind of a massive asshole who abandoned their friends for no clear reason, or dead. But enough about communication, because now it's time to talk actual effect of V leaving and the effect that that had on your friends. Let's start with a disclaimer real quick, however, because there seems to be a massive misunderstanding again with this ending. The effects that come with this ending, to me, were either inevitable or they were probably going to happen anyway. Because remember, this wasn't a coma that lasted 2 months. It was 2 years, and in Cyberpunk 2077 time, that's a long time. But more than that, while this DLC does sort of give credence to the Mr. Blue Eyes ending, remember, V is pretty much going to die in every ending or be gone for a long time. Again, from anywhere from like 6 months to 2 years. But let's be real here, medical prognosis is not always accurate. It's very possible that V just straight up dies tomorrow. And in Temperance and the Path of Least Resistance, V just dies, which probably means the same things that were going to happen in this ending were going to happen in all the other ones as well. Victor sells out to Zeta Tech, Misty leaves Night City, River breaks his moral code to help his family, Panam is mad, we'll get to that, and Judy moves on and settles elsewhere, and Carrie possibly regresses back to his older rocker boy self. These things probably would have happened anyway, because again, at the end of the day, V is eventually going to be gone. Even the Devil and the Sun endings, there is no guarantee that V survives. The Sun ends with you following the word of Mr. Blue Eyes, who is about as trustworthy as a literal snake. V will eventually leave the lives of these people, whether that's 6 months or 2 years. V is either going to die or going to be gone for so long that it won't even matter. However, just because that's true doesn't mean that I agree necessarily with the fates of these characters that was handled by CDPR, or how they were even executed. Misty and Victor, I think, are the ones that I have no problem with. Misty was destined to always leave Night City, especially with nothing tangible connecting her to it anymore. And Vic, well, he was getting pressured even back in the prologue to sell out, and with the death of Jackie and supposed death of V, there's only so many hits a person can take before they break, and with all your hope gone and withered away, those hits just come harder and harder. Goro, on the other hand, is a weird case because, for one thing, there's no guarantee that he ends up alive at all in your playthrough, and in most other endings it implied that he was going to go down his own path of least resistance. I think it's interesting how Takamura is basically going down the same path that V is now going down, becoming his own face in the crowd, and I like that he also stuck to his beliefs and his samurai honor. I also like that his fate is left like V's, kind of open-ended. Maybe he's some poor beggar, maybe he embraced his culinary desires and opened a food stand, or is working in a kitchen like his father, or maybe he's a merc like V was, taking jobs from fixtures and becoming his own Night City legend. I'm sure a former high-level Arasaka agent is in high demand. Judy, I think, out of the romantical companions, is the least ridiculous and vague. Sure, it's a bit weird, especially if you romanced her, that she moves on so quickly, but in real life it's a meme for lesbians to marry each other after knowing each other for like, what, a couple months? So the timeline, while being a bit ridiculous, moving across the country, then getting in a relationship, then getting married, all after being in a serious relationship for a couple months, the timeline's shaky to say the least, but it's not crazy unrealistic. And Judy's reactions to you aren't even that crazy either. She tells a romance fee rightly so that she's glad she's alive, but to not come around because it could potentially put a wedge with her new partner and relationship. And honestly, while the time spent with V were great, that also coincided with like the worst period of her adult life. Judy probably just wants to move on completely from Night City and everything that brings. As for her friend V, her reaction is fine, simply telling V that she's glad to hear they're okay and to stop by if they happen to be in Pittsburgh. Overall, I would say that Judy probably is the best out of the 4 romances in this ending, at least in their reaction to you. Moving on to River. Look, River is tough because on one hand, personally, I was never really connected to the guy. I'm sure the quests he was a part of were good, and I like him as a character, but he's just not your best friend, if you get what I mean, and personally, he's just kinda boring. But on the other hand, personal feeling aside, what could River have even possibly done that would have made V hate them or be ashamed of them? Like, what are you, a pimp? You in the Valentinos with that new facial hair? What could you have possibly done to make V mad at you, bro? You even said you did it to help Randy. I just don't get it personally. There's very little that, he could have done to have this reaction. It feels very out of place to me for his character to be so despondent over something that honestly isn't really that big a deal. I mean, River was part of the NCPD, easily one of the most corrupt and evil police orgs in fiction, and while he was the good cop, it's just absurd to me that whatever River did in this ending would be so crazy as to wallow in self-hate forever. I mean, I think it fits his character as the only good cop, sort of becoming removed from that power structure and having to engage in acts that conflict with his moral code to help his family. I think that's a natural progression of the character, but I don't know, I would have rather much preferred a River that is like a private detective that's been overburdened with work and cases and is feeling more despondent about that, and that's why he can't help V, or why he's so pity and self-wallowy. I think that would have been much better than this woe is me shtick that he has going on. Moving on to Carrie, well, he's Carrie. I mean, I don't have much to say about him. The only mild criticism that I have here is that, to me, at the end of Carrie's quest, it felt like to me that he was maybe returning to his roots, sure, but he was also maturing and finally becoming this better person and an artist. However, in this ending, he's just sort of there. He seems to be the same rocker boy he's always been, maybe even regressing to what he was back with Johnny and Samurai, And I can't even say that really with any amount of like authority. He just seems like regular old Carrie, and I think it fits that he's the one that has the best reaction to V out of all the companions, being very friendly with them. But I don't know, it just feels like he's the same and that nothing really much changed with them. And finally, Panam. Oh boy. Panam has always been hot-headed or ill-tempered, if you will. She is very easy to anger, especially if it goes against her plans or how she views the world. She is stubborn and not easily persuaded. More than that, she has, to me, very little trust in those outside of her circle, and she does not seem to give her trust out easily. Because of that, if someone in her mind betrays her, goes against her wishes, whatever, it impacts her more than it would other people. Panam was never one to delegate her anger to somebody else. Hell, she confronted Rogue to her face in the afterlife after Rogue pissed her off. And while Panam doesn't want anything more to do with Rogue, and she does straight up just abandon people if they piss her off, Panam never would have lacked the will to tell you that. She would have never had someone else speak with her about her feelings in her stead. And that is, in my opinion, one of the biggest failings of this ending. It should have been Panam calling you and not Mitch. Panam should have been the one on that fucking phone call. And that is the biggest problem that I have with her reaction. Not that she shouldn't be mad or that it's weird that she's mad. It's that she wasn't there at all. Lastly, let's discuss our beloved player character, V, and their fate in this ending. In all the other Cyberpunk 2077 endings, you the player are simply choosing how you want to go out, how you want to die. Quiet life or blaze of glory. Do you want to become a legend? Stick with your morals and trust your friends to help you. Do you accept the inevitable tide? Do you make a deal with the devil, or do you even choose the path of least resistance? Keeping with that idea that the endings decide the fate of V rather than the more traditional RPG where you choose the fate of the universe or something similar, the ending that Tower has, I think, is one of the better ones in regard to that line of thinking. Specifically, V is, well, alive first off. More than that, it's more like a new beginning in a way. When V dies and is born again in the game, it felt to me that they were trapped. No matter what they did or who they met, couldn't solve the relic issue. In every ending besides this one, V interacts with a force that is tied to Night City in a way. Even the Aldecados have been in Night City and around Night City for decades, as evident by Johnny's flashbacks. Every ending still ties them to the city in some way. They're still stuck in the same repeating pattern. Each of these endings keep V trapped in this never-ending cycle of trying to find a cure for the relic and trying to hold out on to hope where there realistically may not even be any. Until, well, the inevitable happens. Until Temperance. This ending, however, is a bit different. It's, to me, breaks the cycle. And that cycle is the blaze of glory. It's not the quiet life. In each of the endings, the only way to even get those 4 endings is to tackle some part of Arasaka, and you will fight Atom Smasher in all of them. Regardless of your choice, you have to fight him. And regardless of the game's weird reputation system, killing Atom Smasher for good, well, that we know of, automatically, in my mind, makes you a legend. The only other ending that breaks that cycle is the Path of Least Resistance, and as we discussed earlier, that ending is not good, and I don't consider it to be legitimate. Tower ending is different because, well, yes, you do get this ending, at least for me, by killing a bunch of people in a spaceport and basically igniting a corporate war. Nobody really knows that it was V at the heart of that. What this means is that while yes, V is still a legend, they're not a legend in the same way. They're a legend that will fade away, as pointed out by Rogue in the end credits. This ending, to me, is the only real quiet life ending. To get this ending, V has to break the cycle by sacrificing everything, even their implants. And to even get here, you have to basically betray everyone you knew and love. You have to betray your own morals, and you even have to betray Johnny. The quiet life, as we know in Cyberpunk, is not easy to obtain, and it will fundamentally change who you are as an individual. It's not something that can just be done. I mean, to even get to this point where you can consider the quiet life, that means you had to have been loud. It means you had to have made some noise. And as this ending perfectly portrays, there are consequences to putting that cat back in the bag. You can't just disappear, especially not after the things V has done. To truly live the quiet life for someone like V, in their shoes, you have to betray yourself. You have to change, and you have to abandon the people that you knew in your previous life. There is no ending in Cyberpunk without consequences. They are all their own tragedies with their own slimmers of hope. The Tower ending is no different. Is this ending the worst ending in Cyberpunk 2077? No. As we talked about earlier, the Path of Least Resistance is by far the worst one. It's not even a tragedy, that one. It's just misery incarnate. Is this ending the worst out of the four main ones? Well, that's really up to your interpretation. I mean, my personal favorite ending is Temperance because that's the first one I got, and it's the one that makes the most sense to me and how I play my characters in Cyberpunk. At the end of the day, what is best and what is worse, it's really up to you. Played Cyberpunk and felt that this ending did a massive disservice to you, and that's cool. If you play this ending and thought it was the best, most profound ending ever, then that's cool too. At the end of the day, all the endings have their own pros and cons, and each of those are going to be different person to person. However, could this ending have been done better? Absolutely. Could CDPR have written a better story? Could they have changed the character's face? Could they have, done a thing differently here or there? Could they have, even changed this ending entirely and left it more in line with the other endings? Could they have, not even brought into this idea of a quiet life in a blaze of glory? Whatever, right? They could have done a million different things, but they didn't. The ending is what it is, and it's the one that we have now. And I think it is a nice option if you want to go that more quiet life route. But at the end of the day, it's still up to you. I think, again, it's a nice option for those who want it, but realistically, how many player characters would consider this the ending? And I think this is where we go back to the path of least resistance, where the quiet life and this sort of idea of what you have to give up to achieve that in Cyberpunk 2077 just isn't realistic for V. And I think that's what the biggest problem with this ending really is. Because just like the path of least resistance, just like the devil ending, just like even Temperance, the tower ending is not what most people would have chosen for their V, but more than that, I don't think it's what the character of V would have chosen anyway, regardless of our player choices. Because, well, yes, to a certain extent we control their actions, they are still a definitive character within this world. Because it wouldn't have been like V, someone who was so affected by their best friend Jackie's death, to have someone help them, to have someone sacrifice a lot for them, and to betray them for a corpo spook who lied to them, and it's at the end of the day under orders of a government who will try to kill them, or most likely won't have their best interest at heart. It's just not a realistic ending, and I think that's what the biggest problem with it is. It's just not an ending that fits into this grand design of what Cyberpunk 2077 originally was. And because of that, it just feels out of place. So while it is a nice option, it doesn't really feel like one. Thanks for watching. I've been Jerkbull. Thank you for supporting my last video, and I hope to see you next time.